Jordan, welcome to the show, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting here. How about living in Seattle? So I think that's what Knoxville has become is
Oh my gosh.
we're living in
It's
Seattle.
well, I saw something and this is could be totally made up. I saw something that was like last year, 2018 was the 8th wettest year in Tennessee ever recorded. And this year has started off worse than that. So I don't know what it is miserable.
I know we had flooding last week. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, I know you live about in the area of town I
Yeah.
do. And I mean,
Yeah.
we got out because it was my daughter's birthday. She had a birthday party. We got out. I mean, it was crazy. It looked like there were new rivers everywhere in town.
Yes.
And it's like we
Yeah.
live in a tropical rainforest. And of course, it's a little dark in here for me today. I've got the light on, but it's raining outside again. So here we go.
Yeah.
That's ruining all my mountain biking.
I don't know when. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know when I'm going to play golf again. It's like 6 months, like maybe by August it'll be dry. And
Right. You're like, okay, we might get out there. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. I can't wait for people to hear your story. We've known each other for, I think we were talking about this last time we had coffee. It's a little bit longer than we both realized. I think I met you back around, might have been at Valcourt, the University of Tennessee's pitch competition. And I think you were still a student there. And
yes, it was a decade ago. It really was a decade
crazy.
Ago.
Long time we've known each other, but you're doing really great things. So before we get to the work you're doing and the companies you're looking at and sort of, like I mentioned, I'd love for you to share what you look at when you're looking at companies for yours to invest in. Give everybody a little sense of your background, education, what got you where you are, kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, so we'll probably get more to this. I'm the lemonade stand kid, right? So I've been the entrepreneur since I was like 6, trying to get my dad to give me Kool-Aid so I could sell it to somebody. So my background has always, since I was a kid, I've known I'm going to do business, right? I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to, it was never a thing like deciding a major, for example, in college. It was like, okay, well, this is easy. Tennessee. I went to the University of Tennessee because I didn't know that there were other schools. When I was little, I thought Alabama and Florida existed to play Tennessee in football.
That is all it is, right?
Yeah. So that's what you do when you're in my family. You graduated from high school. You went to Tennessee. It was just a thing. And so when I went, they had an entrepreneurship degree. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, well, duh, right? I've known forever that that's what I wanted to do. Interesting enough, we'll get more to this later. It's not what I'm doing currently, sort of.
It kind of is, though. Yeah.
Sort of. But no. So went to the University of Tennessee, got a degree in entrepreneurship, and had the theory in college. It's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake, and networked the heck out of. There's
your first tip, folks. It's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. It's all about who you know.
Graduated with a very good GPA. So don't
don't undersell it, right?
Yeah, but I didn't value that as much as meeting people. So graduated from there and then got out of college going, okay, I have a degree in entrepreneurship. What in the world am I going to do next? And I started a business, which we can get more to this later if you want to, but I started a business when I was 17, sealing driveways and pressure washing. And I ran that through college. And I graduated from college and I'm like, okay, I really don't think I want to seal driveways the rest of my life. Like, I don't know that the macroeconomics of this is really where I want to be or how I should use my education. What in the world is a 21-year-old going to do? So I went to okay, hey, you know where I want to be. What in the world should I do? And he looked at me and he said, you need to wake up every day and do something that challenges you. And the moment it's not challenging you, go do something else.
Nice.
Well, at the time you're like, great, thank you, except I'm 21. What does that mean? Right? I'm trying to actually figure out how I'm going to go make money, and
exactly.
Go challenge yourself. It ended up being the best advice I've ever gotten, but at the time you're like, this is worthless. I can't use this. And so a week later, he actually called me back and said, hey, I've got this opportunity at this investment bank that I own, among other things. Why don't you come work as a financial analyst? The guy with an entrepreneurship degree was not worried about financial analytics. It was, worried about how you can grind to the next penny.
Right.
Did it and started doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions work in Knoxville, kind of, boutique investment banking work, and fell in love with that. And that actually has entered into a career where I'm now the vice president of corporate development for a large company that does records and information management, which is, there's a lot more to unpack there.
Sure.
but I manage our acquisition program. So I'm still buying companies and valuing companies all day and acquiring companies and integrating companies and then helping run companies. And so it's still a really interesting job. I work from my home office, which is incredible. So even though I'm not technically, I don't own my own company right now, I certainly feel like an entrepreneur every day.
It's still very entrepreneurial. If I
Yeah.
could take you back to the beginning, I'm curious.
Yeah.
You said you basically grew up always knowing you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Can you
Yeah.
point to anything that sort of got that idea in your head? Was there a family member who was an entrepreneur? Was it seeing someone on TV? What was it? Do you know?
I think it skips generations. So my dad, actually my dad is retiring today, working from the same company for 35 years.
Well,
So
congratulations, Dad.
today's I sent him a super long email this morning. He's a career guy. He thinks you wake up, you go to work, you come. I mean, he was a career guy for this corporation. He's had a fantastic career. But I think it skips generations. Me watching that, while I respected it like crazy, I respect my dad and his career, I was like, like,
What was it about the career that you thought, nah, that's not for me?
well, I think it's probably just the risk aversion. I think
Gotcha.
a riskier person. His is so risk averse. It's just you go and you do a good job and you get paid for it. For me,
Right.
that's not fun. Like,
Right.
look, you're not eating what you kill, right? Go.
Right.
So I think there's part of that. I grew up on a street where bikers, like people who rode bike by my house all the time. Like and I realized when I was, I don't know, probably young teen, so 12 or 13, I was like, look, I could sell bottles of water on the street or cups of water. They'd have to carry less. And, they could stop and just grab something real quick because they pass every Saturday. Everybody's passing by. And I just realized you can make a lot more money than like going and having somebody pay you if you're on your own. And so I think it was a couple little moments like that, not any big light bulb moment.
But just kept reinforcing over time.
Yeah, it was just like,
for myself. Was it about money necessarily, or was there something else? Was it, just control over my schedule? I mean, there's no wrong answers. Everybody has their own.
I think part of it was definitely money. I wouldn't say that I'm greedy or that's what motivates me today. But I think another example, when I started the driveway sealing and pressure washing business, I was 17, Jonathan, and my best friend came to me and he said, hey, my aunt's neighbor is paying someone $800 to pressure wash their fence. At the time, there are not many things a high schooler won't do for $800. I mean, you're like, wow, that is wealthy. I'm about to get rich, And so, I started to realize there that yeah, you can control what you're doing, and that was more fun for me. So I guess part of it is motivation for money. I mean, we used to go and seal a driveway from 8 to noon, make, $50 an hour a piece from 8 to noon when our friends were making $9 an hour working at some, retail shop or something. We'd come and then we'd sit by the pool all day. And like the ability to make money and then also just be sitting by the pool. I remember my dad just come home, he'd see us hanging out at my pool and he'd be like, what did you do today? I made a ton of money this morning. And he would like roll his eyes because he's like, you need to be at work, working.
Right. Yeah. So even hearing the successes, he was like, no, you got to go into your 8 to 5.
Yeah. Even though I'd be like, Dad, I made $150 this morning, which as a high schooler, again, made $1 billion. I mean, it's like, and he just roll his eyes and be like, you need to go get a real job. And it's like, okay, that's fine. So I think autonomy, realizing that you can have more autonomy as an entrepreneur was very attractive to me. So I don't know. There's just it's some switch. It's something in you that just goes, I want to create myself. And so, yeah, it's money, it's autonomy. And then it's just the challenge and the creation, right? You have to go eat what you kill. So.
That was the next thing I was sensing was just the challenge of being able to go out and do it in the first place. And I think that's one of the things that also keeps me ticking. It's just that, can I get up every day and literally go out and eat what you kill and just keep pushing and seeing if I can get to that next level on those things. So so clearly the successes really sort of pushed you in that direction. And then now let's see, what year did you graduate from the university? Because I'm trying to think through the entrepreneurship degree.
2011.
Okay. All right.
So the beginning of 2011.
And then you decide you're going to go and be a financial analyst, and you're thinking, And this is the reason I'm going here with you, Jordan, is a lot of people just don't understand that you just never know where your life experiences are going to take you. And I think
Totally.
looking back, I'm going to speak for you. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I think looking back, that exposure was actually key to what you do now. Just the ability to analyze financials and look at companies and things like that.
Totally changed the course of my career. I very, very quickly realized that if you ever wanted to have a level of sophistication in your business, entrepreneurship, that you had to understand your financials and your cash flow. I get shocked, and there's pros and cons to this. I get shocked sometimes when people start businesses and they have no idea what their upside or their downside is. I mean, no idea.
Right.
And that's just not the way I operate. I think you need to be very disciplined. However, you can have paralysis by analysis. I've heard people say a lot of times, hey, great MBA students make terrible entrepreneurs. And the reason is because they learn so much about the risks that they convince
them. In theory too, they're not versed in actual experience, which you had.
Right. And so there's a balance there, right? I really do think you need to understand your financials. And if you ever want to raise money, or have a bank pay attention to you, the more well-versed you are in what your future cash flows are and what assumptions drive those cash flows and how you got to those assumptions and how those assumptions are accurate. Man, that's so valuable. And there's a lot of people who they can never take their business to the next level or even get it off the ground because they don't understand their financials. So yeah, it was critical for me to go from, being this, driveway ceiling guy.
Right.
With an entrepreneurship degree where we didn't do that much and to being able to build full financial models with cash flows and really understand what's driving, what happens if your receivables go from 30 to 75 days, how much more money do you need to go raise because you have a receivables problem, right? I mean, there's little questions like that. I would not even understood to ask that question, right?
Right.
But yeah, it really did change. It changed my career path for sure. But then also, I'll be interested to see how that plays out in the future.
Well, let's hold there for a little bit because I think it's important for the listeners to hear as well. It's just this idea of, you see it on like the reality shows, right? Know your numbers. And that's, you're saying know your financials behind it beyond. So you talked a little bit about cash flow. We all know that's important. Cash is king is the saying. You got to have cash on hand to do things with. What other things were you exposed to as an analyst that you realize is extremely important for companies to really pay attention to, whether they're existing, large companies or startups in the first place, beyond cash flow? I mean, is there a balance sheet component to it? Where does some of this fall with profit and loss? You talked about turns a little bit with accounts for AR, those type things.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, that's a great question. Not one that I think I've thought a ton about recently. There's two things. One, I would say that people really, really need to understand what drives their revenue assumptions. So every entrepreneur I see is just incredibly optimistic, and typically is they believe I will go sell that, right? But understanding scenarios of how your revenue is going to grow and how that drives your cash flow. There's a lot of times where you're taking on debt. And then that's what I would say. The other component is debt, right? Like,
right.
What is my, what's my monthly number? How can I structure this debt to make sure that this debt doesn't my business? And I think if you understand, assuming you understand how the expenses work, right? Your cost of sales or cost of goods sold, understanding your revenue scenarios. What if my revenue doesn't grow as fast as I thought it was? How does that change my business and vice versa? I think those are the two really critical things.
Sounds a little bit, if I kind of bring all that together, it's a little bit just about understanding projections in the first place, forward-looking financials.
Yeah, because I see all the time in businesses that always, let's say you have a business, people send this all the time to me when I'm looking at investing in a business, where you see this graph where, it's been growing fairly stable, let's say 3, 4, 5% a year. But then all of a sudden, now that they're ready to sell their business, it's going to grow at 15% a year.
Weird how that happens.
You see this big hockey stick, and all it does is make you just discount what in the world they're thinking. Like, it's like, well, that's obviously not right? Why would they should keep the business if they really believe that that's.
Is that something you push them on to be able to support the rationale behind it. And so if
Every,
they can support it, it's okay. But if they can't, you're totally just
absolutely.
throwing it out the window.
The businesses that I pay for is they go, no, no, no. The reason for this is because look, we've got this contract signed and this contract signed. And so even though the growth last year was 6%, when you ramp this up and here's the math, it's actually going to be 12% growth next year. And then look, we've got the biggest sales pipeline because we hired this salesperson. And that's why we believe we'll drive a 15% growth the next year. Then you go, whoa.
Now I'll pay attention.
Yeah. Most of the time they go, well, the business is in really good shape and it's been growing, but we think the growth will just be better in the future. And so we tacked on, 12% growth. And you're like, great. That is one Excel formula. Nice job. So there's totally a difference. Yeah. There's totally a difference in those two mentalities.
Yeah. So just being able to support your assumptions in the first place with hard facts and so let's take that and transition to, I mean, you're in charge of acquisitions and things for the company. And I imagine it's going to be some of these same things we just talked about. I mean, when you're out there looking for a good company to get involved in, what does the company that you're working with right now, what do you guys look for? What is it that sort of says, this is something that I'm interested in? Because I think that relates to, I mean, that's you guys are investors. It relates to startup investing too at the early level.
Totally. So I can put two hats on this, Jonathan. The one is I'm currently in the process of looking for my own investments,
right?
Personally.
Right.
So I think about how I view businesses personally, but then also for my company, right? We're consolidating our competitors. And so for the most part, we're buying people in our industry or at least close by our industry. So it's a different answer for those two things, but there's some themes that are woven through both of those that I think are incredibly important. For me personally, I love boring recurring income. If it can
not
be
so boring, to be honest. Yeah, but I get what you mean.
No, I mean, so if there's something that is just once you receive that revenue, and it's going to stay that revenue until you screw it up,
right?
Or until something changes, that is so attractive.
So we're talking a little bit about MRR, right? Monthly recurring revenue.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
what type industries have you seen that in that tends to make a lot of sense? I guess software would be one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of software businesses where they have, once you sign up for their software, then they're paying you to use that software, right? So that's an important way to set that up. The second would be anything with storage. So you see self-storage. We buy a lot of record storage businesses. So it's boxes of paper on shelves that lawyers and hospitals and mortgage companies and insurance companies and banks, they all store, and they have to store forever.
Right. Because you got a nice built-in sort of hedge there. I mean, they're required to carry these for 7 to 10 years or whatever the number is.
Minimum,
they're going to pay for it for that long.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And there's contracts. So a lot of times there's contracts with minimum, and you build it. So what your contracted value of these customers are. There's businesses like shredding, which is also something that we acquire. So you have bins and consoles. You go into a doctor's office, you see a little bin that they shove in paper in, and it's compliant. Well, they're being charged, call it 40 or 80 bucks a month for somebody to come pick that up and shred it and then sell the paper. Well, you're picking that up. It's route based, right? So you think of things like dump trash and dumpsters. It's a great business. You think of things like waste or medical waste, right? There's a lot of medical waste companies that go around and basis. I saw a business the other day. I don't know their business well, but I assume it's fairly route-based. It was Harmon Ice. Have you seen those trucks?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know anything about the business, but that's one where, they've got customers who need their ice. They're freezing it. They're delivering it with their trucks. They're putting it in their freezers. It's really interesting business model to me. So recurring revenue is key because you know how to value it. Anybody that looks at that recurring revenue goes, I can value this business and I can pay for it. What's hard is to sell something that's not recurring. So I'm helping a buddy of mine who's selling a business that does promotional products and custom apparel.
Right.
We're actually closing fairly soon, so we were able to sell it, but it was really for buyers to value that business because you're selling a customer base. Well, that customer base tomorrow, the day after close, can go and buy from somebody else. There's no switching costs for the customer. The only thing you have is, hey, they've been really, really good for me. They've been reliable customers.
Relationship based.
Well, that's dangerous for a buyer. So when you're thinking about selling a business, And entrepreneurs should always be thinking about building to sell. You don't have to sell it, but it's going to be a better business if you're able to sell it, right? You're going to have built it with a way that was contracted. Like there's some businesses in my industry, for example, Jonathan, where they'll go, oh, well, we don't have contracts with our customers because we just sell them on our customer service. We just tell them if they want to leave, they're welcome to leave. That's probably a decent way to build your business, but it's a horrible way to sell your business, right? Because then every buyer goes, huh. And their business, if you think about it on a daily basis, is so much less protected. You can still sell customers on your customer service.
Right.
They are not sleeping as well at night as the other guy who built his business with really good contracts.
Are you taking into account churn when you look at this type of thing?
All the time. Yeah, we look at customer churn.
Yeah.
You know, I'm closing on a business this month that literally has lost one customer in 3 years.
That's a pretty good sign.
Their contracts are fantastic and their service is fantastic.
Right. Why not have both? I guess is what you're saying.
Even if they have a service issue, they get to go, well, wait a minute. You can't leave because you have to pay these termination fees in your contract. Give us time to fix it. Right. And it gives you time to fix it. So the biggest thing I look for is recurring revenue, is stuff that is repeatable. And not only is that great from a valuation standpoint, it's also great because you're building something that's mailbox money. You're building something that is just is great for you personally as the owner. Right. Never sell it.
So selfish question, Jordan. I'm curious, in your experience when you've been looking at companies, is it a little easier to build these type of sellable models when you're selling a product versus a service itself? So, you know, when you're selling some sort of widget versus a professional service business where you've got clients and, financial advisors and things like that. Is it a little bit easier to do with a product-based company?
I don't think so. If I think of most product-based companies, right, those have two models, right? You can have your recurring customers that are replacing orders depending on who it is, but you also can have just your one-time consumer sell, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably equivalent. If I think about like a law firm, which is just professional services,
right?
They're only billing if they're working, right? That's not recurring income. That's kind of terrible. But then there's consulting businesses that have retainers, right?
Sure.
Is a completely different model. So I don't know that. I think it's both. I think it depends on how you set up your model and what kind of industry you're in.
So on the service side, just kind of trying to get to that recurring side somehow, right? Makes sense. Yeah,
I think
there is ways to productize a service business as well.
Correct. Yeah. Like I said, waste management. I mean, you pay your dumpster company every month, or
right.
Security, right? Security is a one-time setup, but then you pay them every month to monitor, right? And so there's a lot of these companies. That's a great business, right? It's recurring income. They're paying you every month,
right?
Really just a service.
So monthly recurring revenue. What else sort of springs to mind that you think makes a good acquisition target? How much is the team a part of that? I mean, are you going to retain the team in most of the transactions, or are you sort of moving them on after a while? What are your thoughts on team?
So that's different. That's different depending on which hat I put on. So that's a great question. So team is incredibly important if you're buying a single business and you know that they want to, you need them to stay involved, right? Then there's negotiations around who the team is. And yeah, I think it's incredibly important, and people are going to want to structure deals to, make sure that they have management agreements in place and that everybody's on the same page. And that's when trust is incredibly important, right? In a deal like that, where you've got to be like-minded business people to do a deal. For us in our industry, a lot of times that's one of the things we're taking advantage on, is being able to rely on our own team and eventually transition team members out of the business, especially from a management standpoint. So it is less important. If there are team members that are really important, especially to the transition, that's when we think about that. So in my industry, team is a little less important. And I don't want to sound heartless, right? But it's just sort of the economics.
It's just the way it works. And it can be tough to retain a team, right? I mean, philosophies change and cultures change and things like that in these transactions.
And that's really tough. So I would say another thing outside of team, I guess, is we look a lot at just organic growth. We look at your ability for your customers that you already have to just be able to grow themselves. Like, how much wallet share do you have within a customer Bank of America is your customer, right? And they're producing $1,000 a month in revenue in whatever industry you're in. Well, Bank of America can pay you more than $1,000. So we look a lot at organic growth and organic growth opportunity to be able to understand, how much can we grow that specific customer? How much opportunity is there within that?
On the flip side of that, are you looking at customer concentration? So a company who may have too much concentration in one customer or one category is not necessarily as good?
Yeah. So a big piece of our industry, if I just think about it, is we look at we actually have a scorecard. So the way that we think about these businesses, this is probably sort of where you were headed, is we weight strategic value the highest, right? What's our ability to do future price increases or add-on acquisitions, or does it get us into a new market that we don't currently have? So how much strategic value is there in this acquisition? Is it a competitor of ours that's been killing us, right? There's a ton.
You're in every deal you're fighting with them over.
Yeah,
and over.
yeah. Well, let's go buy them. We just did that in a deal in Costa Rica, for example. We bought a competitor of ours that was a really good competitor. Well, we valued that business more because it was like, goodness gracious, they're not going to kill us anymore on these sales calls, And then, so strategic value is one. Then we look at upside. So what's the upside opportunity? Are there sales in the pipeline? Do we think we've been conservative in our valuation, right? That's going to be upside. If we think our revenue projections are conservative, our expense projections are conservative. Then we look at like customers and contracts. So, from the upside, we look at organic growth, like I mentioned with wallet share. Then on the downside, on the risk, we say, okay, what's the integration risk? Do we have to move facilities? Are there team member risks that we have, right? So what's the integration risk? Then we look at customers and contracts. So what kind of concentration do they have? What are their contracts like? In their contracts, do they have termination fees, right? Do we know what our protection is? Then we look at our legal protection. Is this purchase agreement good? Has it been heavily negotiated, or have they pretty much accepted the terms that we want, right? So if we run into a problem later, how good is our legal protection? So we kind of, and I think those are, even though that's what we're looking at specifically in our business, that's really a broad view of things that buyers should be thinking about, or that that sellers should be considering as they build their business.
Yeah, those are great points. All those things, if you're the better prepared you are for them, the more investable you are as a company. Right. So I think hopefully people had a pen out, or they can hit rewind and check out all of those things. As we start to wind down here, I've got 2 more questions for you, if I can. I'm curious, sure. As an entrepreneur yourself, what's the hardest part of being an entrepreneur? I mean, what's the toughest thing?
So I think this may just be for me right now. What I've learned, I've now with my company, so this is just counting the 5 years I've been with my company now, before, it's with an investment bank. So just with my company, I just this week closed my 74th transaction.
Wow.
And what I learned through all of those is I'm typically buying those businesses from entrepreneurs. They started it, 5, 10, 25, 30 years ago. The difference between them and anybody else is the fact that they got up and they started it. And so
doing it is what you're saying. Just going.
Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest thing I've learned recently is just start, just go.
Yeah, even if you're not sure the exact path, just start going down a road. You may fork later, but just go.
The example of that is a lot of businesses I've bought have been guys who's owned moving and storage businesses. They literally bought a box truck. Hey, could you store these business records for me? And they go, sure, we can.
Yeah,
right?
Why not?
And then all of a sudden they have this, $5 million revenue. Started by, go to bed and go and start, and you'll find opportunities.
Cool. What's been the best part of being an entrepreneur?
I think the autonomy.
You're smiling.
Best part. Yeah.
For the folks who will listen to this on the podcast, they can't see it, but he leaned back and smiled really big just then.
Yeah. I mean, even though my wife laughs at me all the time, because she's like, you still get up at 5:30 and you're at your computer at 6, and then you work till 6:30. She's like, you're not autonomous. What do you mean? And I'm like, yes, I am, because it's just, yeah, get up and work from home. And yes, I am employed by another company right now, but I have the experience from being an entrepreneur in college, and but I get up every day, and I depend on me. And for me and my personality, that's it. I love being autonomous. I still have bosses, entrepreneurs. If they've got debt, they've got customers, right? You're not all the way autonomous. Just the ability to get up and know that you control your destiny that day is really exciting to me.
Very cool. Very cool stuff. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today. And it's
Thanks
been
for
great
having
knowing
me.
you. Yeah, absolutely. It's been great knowing you these past 10 years. Can't wait to see what happens for you in the future. You'll have to let us know when you're ready to make your first personal transaction. We can't wait to hear what it is and see where it goes from there.
All
I
right.
appreciate
Sounds
your
great.
time.
Yeah. Thank you.